Hey everyone, so in this video I want to show you the final leg of me making this Survivor logo out of stained glass. Okay, so this is actually a project I've started almost a decade ago and lost track with it, kept it in storage for a number of years, and have just kind of brushed the cobwebs off of it, figured out a new setup here. I'm gonna go and finish the outside. I've kind of worked on it the past week and I've finished the inner circle, which I'll show you in a moment. Now we're gonna work on the outer circle, which I've simplified. And I'll go into the reason for that and how to kind of do this, but this is gonna be more about kind of crossing this off my list. Let's take a look at what I have so far and let's get back to it. So as you can see, this is what I'm using now as my setup in the back porch here. This is the blueprint, what I'm building on top of. Literally, this has been made probably like 9 or 10 years ago. But this section here, the snake head and this green part is what I finished this week. So this area right here is what I kind of have just finished in terms of this inner circle. And as you can see, the outer circle kind of has all these little pieces that, you know, I kind of learned my lesson when I started with this area here. These little pieces are kind of important to the wording here, but when you get to soldering, especially when you're using copper foil, it kind of clouds the lines, and so it's better to have bigger pieces, especially on the outer rim, which this is an oval, which is an uncommon stained glass shape. And so to keep it structurally sound, it's so much better to have these be the, you know, larger pieces that can kind of bolster what is kind of the more detailed intersection with the color. So I still have some color to do with the toucan at the top here, but this is all going to be clear glass around the edge. I have my grinder over here and all my tools. And so this will help me to, you know, cut the glass with the glass cutter and to snap it with these. And the only thing I need is to go find another piece of clear glass to match the clear glass I have for this outer rim. I don't think I have enough. So I'm gonna be headed there actually right now before I get started, and I'm gonna try and hunt that down. So I'm actually headed right now to the Nazareth stained glass shop that's nearby. I haven't been there before, but I'm hopeful that I'll be able to get the glass piece that I just showed you in the previous video. That will kind of be the final piece to the puzzle. Hopefully they have it and we can keep moving forward. Okay, so that was a success. They had something quite similar to my original piece, which I'll show you here. Maybe I'll get it on the other. Now this is kind of better. Let's see if I can get it over here. There we go. So you can see it's kind of like this grooved piece of glass. This was the glass I was going to use on the border, but I don't have enough to fit on this one sheet, and so I'm going to be using this, which I found, this kind of scrap piece that they had, which is very similar. The ridges are a little bigger. Okay, so as you can see here, I'm using my glass as a paperweight because it's a little bit windy out. But you can see how much this cuts down on the amount of pieces just in this corner. I mean, I think I've cut the pieces down into a third because we have a total of 26 on this new map. And I think before it was somewhere around 60 or something like that. So, and you can see all these small little pieces really wouldn't serve the structure of it. It's a nice little touch, but to be honest, once the solder goes on the copper foil, you're not going to see much of this ornate design, and so it's better to keep the structure of the oval. There's plenty of detail on it already. Okay, so I've cut out my first piece, and I'm gonna want to cut this glass with the ridges down, and so the ridges I want to be on the front of it, so facing out. And so I'm gonna have to take this and flip it over, so just so that the other side, after I've cut it, is the reverse of this. I'm gonna want to cut these as shallow as I can, and so the best thing to probably do with this is actually go like this. Cutting this line will be much more beneficial, much easier. Okay, so as you can see, I've hugged it very close so that I get this corner. Okay, so as you can see, I've scored it. It's kind of hard to see, but the line goes all the way up there, and what I used is the back of the glass cutter to kind of bang out the edge on the back side so that it kind of pushes the score through it as best it can, so that now I can use my hand and these pliers on one side to kind of snap it and break it. Okay, so as you can see that it is cut on that line, and even as you can see up here, it didn't follow the score, which it went the way I would hope it would. Is it kind of gave me a little bit of leeway to kind of grind this down now on that diamond the diamond head on that grinder. Okay, so that piece is now grinded. In fact, I had to grind most of this from a flat edge down. I cut a thin sliver, but I didn't want this arc to break this point, and so it was more important that I keep that intact, so I grinded most of this down. And now I'm going to copper the edge, as you can see on here, and you know, it's all about kind of fitting the piece in as best it can before you put that on, because once it's on, you're going to nail it together. As this piece is now kind of vulnerable because the nails are out, but I'm going to kind of bolster it up really nicely, and it'll have one edge that's kind of pushing it all together. That's why I'm making this all sort of big pieces. So this was one of the harder pieces to do, and that's why I wanted to start with it first. So as you can see, I'm down to the last piece, and I couldn't resist setting up my tripod to film how I cut the glass. I know I showed you briefly in the beginning of this video, but I figured I want to memorialize this last piece in that this took me a really long time to finish. Not once I got started on it again, but about 8 years in the making, after a very, very long break in between. But I figured this will show you kind of more details to how I'm doing this with that grinder and with the outlining and the glass cutter, which I kind of glossed over earlier, but we'll get a little bit more of a detail on this right on that final piece right there. So I've gone through the process already of kind of cutting the piece out and then kind of laying it on the overall blueprint to kind of see how it fits. It's the last piece, and so it's kind of vital to keeping the structure on the end, but also in being flexible, because at this point the minor shifts that have occurred throughout, which are only going to be expected, are now going to be at that final piece. Okay, so we're on the final piece, so I can use the rest of this shallow ridged glass that I'm using for that, alternating pattern, as you could kind of see around the edge. So there's going to be a lot to work with here. I was kind of at my last piece for the larger ridged glass on the last piece, and so that's why I didn't film that one, because I wanted to make sure it was done right and cut really carefully, because there was no more glass. That glass was out. So we're good with this one. I'm going to be able to cut 2 or 3 if need be, but we're going to make this happen in one shot. So I have it in reverse as I cut on the flat part, on the flat side. And so I just take my marker. Now I'm going to cut this edge kind of really, tight to it, because this will be my long cut, and I'll break this piece out. And then I'm going to make sure that I keep a little bit of a shallow cut on these so that I can grind the rest, as I mentioned, to get the shape down, because it has shifted a little bit since this iteration. So I'm going to take my glass cutter and we're going to cut that side out. So as you can see, I didn't kind of hug this line too much here. I felt like this was as much of a concave line that I could make so that the glass breaks seamless. It's actually not guaranteed that it will. We will see in a moment, but it was better than doing that, hugging that tight curve, which will end up breaking off maybe one of the corners. But hopefully this will be enough. Let's see right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the end of this and kind of tap that groove into the glass. So that some of the sections go through and it will be easier to break apart. Okay, so now I'm going to use my pliers and hold my breath. Great, so as you can see, that cut really nicely on that line and was a little bit difficult to break, so I have a feeling if I would have hugged it, it definitely would have snapped that corner off. So now we have this piece, and now I'm going to cut the other ends really shallow just to get a majority of it off so that we can go to the grinding part of it. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so as you can see, that was a little bit difficult on this side, although I went ahead and did it anyway because that corner is not going to necessarily need to be that sharp. That's one of the edges that will be kind of shifting, and so I knew that I had some give on this end, and that's why I kind of went with that cut. You can see it nicked the corner off, and that's going to happen a lot. You know, a majority of the pieces, you get those little corners nicked off, but because of the difference between the paper and the glass, you are able to fit it just perfectly without it. So now I'm going to spare you the grinder part as it's loud and annoying, but I'm going to be grinding the edges down to the drawn edges as I continually fit it back and forth. So this is a process that takes a long time, but you can imagine as you sand down a piece of wood, it's the same thing with glass, and I just got to make sure it fits. And so I'll come back when I am about to copper foil it and finish this off. So as you can tell, after a few rounds of grinding, that piece is now ready to go and is in the spot. And so now I'm going to be taking this copper foil, and it's an adhesive, as you can see right there, that kind of comes off the spool, and I'm going to wrap the piece in it, keeping a little bit on each side of the glass piece to be able to fold it over, and that's what gives you that copper outline that will then be soldered on. Okay, so today we are beginning the soldering process. So I have my soldering iron, solder, and flux over there, and we're gonna be attaching these pieces now on top of the copper foil. So as you can see, I've done this section of the O here just to kind of shake off the rust. I hadn't soldered in a long time, but hopefully you'll be able to see, you know, I'll get a close-up of it after we do it, but all you're gonna do is you're gonna take your brush, a small, you know, very small paintbrush, thin paintbrush. You wanna kind of have the detail element of this, and you're just gonna brush over a thin layer on top of this copper foil. And then you're gonna take your solder and a already heated up soldering iron. So this is pretty hot right now. It's been heating up for a while. Obviously I've already done some. And then you're just gonna put the solder near the line you're doing and perpendicularly hold the solder iron. And then you're just gonna drag it across. I mean, it's completely malleable until you let go, and then it hardens, obviously, but you can always go over it again and it will do the same thing. It's just a matter of kind of getting a nice little kind of rounded bead on the top is the best look you can get. As you can see, it's really easy to just melt the solder, and it just follows the flux as well as the copper foils. So let's finish this R. So I actually got on a roll with it, and once I did the first side, I decided to do the second side, and it just went smoothly with the leading on the outside as well. And so it's all done in one day. I thought it would be multiple days of soldering and, and putting it together, but it's finally finished, so take a look.